Welcome to the EdjSports NFL Podcast. I'm your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at EdjSports. And with me, as he is every Monday, is my co-host, Scott Brown, VP of Data Science here at EdjSports. Scott, how was your NFL Week 4 weekend?
It was all right. I think, the feature was definitely that Sunday night game. Very, very good game for all the obvious storylines I'm sure our audience is aware of. The other games, I'll be honest, they were a little bit lackluster this week. The interesting decisions were a little bit fewer and far between, but they were still there, make no mistake, and we're about to dive into it. So, let's do this.
Yeah, and your Bears got a win. Justin Fields didn't look great, but he looked better than last week. So
yeah, it's hard to look worse than week 3. Strong bounce back. Good to see. I'm kind of nervous, though. It's kind of like one of those classic Bears wins where just like the defense comes through time and time again. Huge.
It helped that it was the Lions.
Yeah, well. Red zone turnover after red zone turnover. But, a win's a win, I guess. We'll see how they're able to continue forward with Fields at quarterback.
Yeah, it was a big weekend. Both of my teams got wins this week as well, Browns and Packers. I mentioned this on the podcast or live stream I just did with Aaron Schatz of Football Outsider as well, going off outside of the NFL. The Packers here, home state team, or not the Packers, I'm sorry, Kentucky Wildcats. I'm getting my teams mixed up big time, but big win, first home win against Florida in quite a while. So a big weekend for me all around. My teams all did pretty well except for those perennially overrated Notre Dame Fighting Irish who continue to let me down year after year. But we'll get back to the NFL now. So before we dive in, though, to recapping the biggest plays from Week 4 in the NFL and some of the most impactful plays, just want to remind everyone again, we'll have our show available for you every Monday throughout the NFL season. Also, be sure to check out our site and experience at EdjSports.com. That is EdjSports.com. And download our new mobile app available for both iOS and Android. You can get pregame betting insights for every NFL game this season, as well as see our fair value spread and total points in the pregame for every game, along with the ability to track your bets and see the probability of them hitting in real time throughout the games. And also on Thursdays, we have our NFL betting preview that I host, sometimes solo, sometimes with a guest. So be sure to tune into that to get some of your value picks. We've hit on a few of those each and every week. Some good picks we've had. We've been doing pretty well. So now let's dive into Week 4's action. We'll start talking about the Sunday Night Football game, the most anticipated homecoming perhaps on record in any sport, definitely in the NFL, as Tom Brady returned to Foxborough to face Bill Belichick and the Patriots, a team he won 6 Super Bowls with. They went to 9 Super Bowls together in the last, 20 years. This game was actually much closer than most anticipated. We actually did have this as a close game at EdjSports in our pregame analysis. We had it as a 3-point spread at our fair value compared to 7 or 8 points in the pregame, and it finished as a 2-point game in favor of Tampa Bay. They went the distance and beat the Patriots, but the Patriots were competitive for most of this game, faced a couple pretty big errors in this one that sunk their chances. So the final drive of the game, the Patriots faced 3rd and 3 with 1:03 remaining in the game, just over a minute left. Mac Jones's pass falls incomplete, which cost them 28% in win probability, which was our 4th most impactful play of the weekend. Now this was a little bit of a double whammy here as they elected to go for the field goal down 2 with 59 seconds remaining in the game. This decision to go for the field goal decreased their pre-snap win probability by 10.2%. So I mentioned this is kind of a double whammy because that 28% drop in win probability would have been a little bit smaller had they chosen the correct decision on 4th down to go for it. Would have only been about 18% and might not have even been in our top 5. But like I said, the decision decreased their pre-snap win probability by 10%. Huge play calling error by Bill Belichick came in as our 3rd worst error of Week 4. This couldn't even be redeemed. Nick Folk missed the kick that would have given them a 1-point lead, cost them their remaining win probability of 31.9%. Ultimately, the game as well. It was the 2nd most impactful play of Week 4, that missed field goal was. But it really shouldn't have come down to this. What do you think about that, Scott?
You're right. It should not have come down to that field goal, at least not, on that particular play, right? When I was watching this game, it just, immediately jumped out to me that this was not the right thing to do. And,
even the broadcasters said it. Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels, they were actually pretty steadfast on this one for once. Seems like they're kind of on both sides
all over the place at times. Yeah, credit to them. But yeah, when I was watching this, I had that sense immediately that this was not going to be a good one. We ran the numbers, and turns out that was confirmed. I'm not always right, but in this one, there's a lot of things working against the Patriots here by just kicking the field goal. And the one that's first and foremost to call out is that even if everything goes right and that kick doesn't hit the upright, it sails through, you're leaving Tom Brady a full minute to come back and beat you, and all he needs is a field goal.
With 2 timeouts.
With 2 full timeouts, right. So we've seen these situations come up already in the first few weeks of the season. I think most head coaches in the NFL have it in their mind, or even some fans. They may, your team makes the field goal if you're the Patriots, and all of a sudden you're close to like a 90% favorite to win the game. No, not so fast. You're actually much closer to being like a 50-50, it being a 50-50 proposition, or in some cases your team's even a slight dog to win the game. This is backed up, I think, empirically by our simulation model. It's backed up by the betting and trading markets on these games, where intelligent actors are valuing, highly putting a lot of value on Tampa Bay's chances to come back and win the game should they find themselves with a deficit with a minute left and 2 timeouts with which to work. So that's really the main thing to think about, that even if everything goes right, you're still a slight dog or really a coin flip to win the game. And then I think in addition to that, picking up the first down there allows you to bleed the clock, but then it also allows you to gain some overage yardage, right? And at 56 yards, that's definitely a field goal that NFL kickers are capable of making. But you're sort of at a point in the field where every additional yard you're able to gain really, really helps boost your chances at making the field goal. So if the Patriots there are able to pick up the first down and maybe gain 7 additional yards, so 10 yards total, that improves the chances of a subsequent field goal attempt dramatically, by like 40 or 50% on top of the base rate of what it already was. So you can easily go from the field goal being like a 50 to 55% proposition to closer to like 80 or 85%, and like that's a big deal, right? Like
especially in those conditions, that's worth a lot. People are citing the rain as a reason either to kick the field goal or not kick the field goal, but that's part of the game, and that percentage increase you mentioned is worth a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And then from there you can just sort of start to consider all the other things that are hard to model that come into play, like the weather, which is going to affect the kick. It's also going to affect a subsequent drive, so maybe that cancels out. But Nick Folk, he's been a journeyman kicker. He's had a good career in the NFL as a field goal kicker. His career long is 56 yards. That was probably under better,
2010, I think I saw. It's been a while since he made a kick
probably under much better conditions. He's had the announcers were on top of it last night in highlighting that he had an injured plant leg, which I'm sure doesn't make things any easier. He came really close to making it, so credit to him. But there's just too many things working against you in that spot to just kick the field goal there. I think going for it was clear. It's backed up empirically by our model. And this one really stood out to me, mainly, it was a bad decision, but mainly because of the situation, right? And Sunday night, Tampa Bay versus the Patriots, Brady's homecoming, to have that decision, have it all come down really to that decision was very interesting, to say the least. And in spite of all those storylines, it's, bad 4th down play calling rears its ugly head yet again, and that we definitely have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of pushback on this morning on Twitter. We've had some New England reporters and people share our information that we send out about this decision, and a lot of people saying, what if I don't think Belichick wanted to risk his quarterback's kind of self-esteem or confidence if he'd look pretty good, or saying, they were only 2 of 9 on 3rd down in that game, and what we talk about recency bias, just because you're 2 of 9 doesn't mean you're going to go for 1 here.
Right.
It's a completely different. They're independent. You're maybe not completely independent. You're playing the same team. Say the way the game's gone, but still you take that chance because it's better than probably a 1 in 3 chance looking at a 3 out of 10 proposition that the people are kind of assuming there. And the other thing, people was very interesting to me being on Twitter last night looking at comparison to the models. A lot of people saying, well, ESPN's much more trustworthy. They had it as plus 7% for the field goal.
My goodness.
But they're the only model that had that. Every other reputable model out there that I saw had it as a 8, 9, 10% go. There was one that might have been closer to 3, 4, 5%, but they were all strongly in favor of going for it. So I'm not sure what they got there, how they got 7% in favor of a field goal, but
yeah, hard to know without digging into the guts of their model. I mean, there are definitely different ways to create such a model. I think we stand by the one that we've created. We feel pretty good about it. We're actually stepping through and simulating through all the sample paths through how the game can end, and we feel really good about how we're able to represent the game. And time and time again, we see that these mistakes are made, and this one, was a really bad decision in a really big spot, in a really interesting game for week 4 of the 2021 season.
Yeah, while there was deservedly a ton of attention on this game, feels like we've covered it a lot here so far. It was covered over the last week, even close to a week and a half or 2 weeks. There was another AFC East team that had a number of interesting plays in their game as well, the Jets. They needed overtime to get their first win of the season over the Titans, but was full of some interesting plays and calls in this. So despite the win, head coach Robert Saleh had a few bad calls late in the game that could have cost them their first win. So starting in the third quarter, faced 4th and 1 on their own 29-yard line. They elected to punt instead of attempting to go for it down by 2, which resulted in a 5.1% win probability loss. Like we said, we say it week in, week out. Don't want to beat a dead horse with this one, but a 4th and 1, even on your own 29, your odds of converting that are so much greater than you think. A lot of times upwards of 60%, close to 70% in some cases. So that one, is kind of a no-brainer despite the field position. Fast forward to overtime, in their final drive, they faced the final drive they had the ball. They faced 3rd and goal on the Tennessee 1. Had a chance to win the game. Zach Wilson, what looked to be, we're pretty sure, was a design run out to the right. Had no receivers over there. Had a Tennessee Titans defender, I don't remember who it was, but did a great job of staying home. Bounced him outside, and instead of throwing the ball away, takes it, like you said, we're talking before the show, almost pulls kind of a truck stick kind of thing, wanting to get some yards. Goes out of bounds at the 4. So this was a major execution error, cost the Jets 30.4% win probability, was our 3rd most impactful play of the week, and like the one with the Patriots before, Coach Saleh's mistake to kick the field goal on 4th down kind of compounded that error to make it that 30.4, whereas it would have been closer to about 17. And again, probably is not in the top 5. But that 4th and goal decision to kick the field goal cost them 13.1% pre-snap win probability. So this ultimately would be the points they needed, that field goal. They held on. We don't like to play results. People will. We see it a lot. Hindsight's 2020. Saw some people saying with the New England game, if they make the field goal, then it's the right call. And we're not talking about this. That's not the way to do it. Just because you have a bad process and it works out doesn't mean you should keep doing that.
That's right.
So it came down to a missed field goal by Randy Bullock with 19 seconds remaining. Tennessee was at only 35.8% prior to that kick, which ended up being our most impactful play of the week. So we know, that late in the game, only 35.8% chance. Why don't you explain kind of what's going on there with the probability or possibility of a tie there as well?
Yeah, we can start there and work backwards. So I mean, at this point, you're in overtime, right? And you're losing by 3, and so you're the thinking is, hey, we'll kick the field goal here. It's a 49-yarder, so that's well within range for most guys in the NFL. We'll kick the field goal and move on here with like 19 seconds left in the game. So you're settling for a tie is what you're doing, which that may be the right thing to do, I guess, in the minds of some. But yeah, I mean, like, really the big thing to realize there is that your upside is capped. It's heavily capped, right? Like, but by kicking the field goal there, the best you can do is tie. And so if the field goal, right, basically whatever their GWC is at that point, we're estimating is about 35-36%. Half of that, or if you double that, that's like the field goal make rate for a 49-yarder, right? That's basically the calculation here. It's pretty straightforward. So yeah, we put a probability of about 70% that the kick goes in, and when it does go in, the game's basically over because there's only 19 seconds left, and so yeah, your GWC's 35%, but then when you miss it, that goes.
You go to 0.
Yeah, you go to 0, and yeah. So once again, another week, another top execution play that comes down to a last-second field goal. This one was a little bit muted, obviously relative to last week's Justin Tucker bomb that did go through, but still, nonetheless, these final second kicks, high leverage, and this one was really no different. Working on back into kind of the earlier time points in the game, that kind of 1-2 combo of the Zach Wilson scramble for negative yardage with the bad fourth down play call by Salah, that was just a comedy of errors, right? I mean, I know, you have a young, scrappy Jets team doing the best they can there. Far be it for me to criticize Zach Wilson necessarily from trying to make a play. However, yeah, if you can throw away the ball, right? I mean, losing 3 yards. The thing to point out is that losing 3 yards there is huge.
Yeah, this would have been at 4th and goal at the 1. I think when I ran it, would have been 24-25% to go. So you're almost doubling it.
Yeah, you'll hear me use the word leverage quite a bit, and what I mean by that basically is just that, like, there's like a nonlinear impact for a very small change in like the variables of the game, right? And so in this case, 3 yards doesn't seem like a lot, but 3 yards down by the goal line is everything. And so, especially when your starting point is the 1 yard line, so moving back 3 yards there is really, really crucial, really bad. And so yeah, I think if you're able to have the presence of mind in the moment to just quickly chuck the ball out of bounds. Zach Wilson's clearly out of the tackle box, doesn't have to worry about grounding or anything like that. Just chuck it, man. Just chuck it, move on.
Give it to a fan. Throw it way up there.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have far to throw it downfield. Just get rid of it, get it out of your hands, move on to 4th down. And, that sort of assumes, hopefully, that your coach is willing to pull the trigger on that subsequent 4th and 1 to go for it. And I guess Robert Saleh is going to leave some doubt in our minds as to what he would have done if they faced that decision. Because on a 4th and 4, I know that's not great, and especially not great compared to a 4th and 1. It's still a go. And we had this as our number 1 play call error of the week. Just really not a good decision here. I mean, anytime you're this close to the goal line and you can play for the win, you should do it. Our model thinks so. I think the numbers clearly back this up. And he definitely did not pass this test, unfortunately, for the New York Jets.
Yeah, and I was calculating the numbers earlier this morning for some work we were doing, and looking at it, they convert. If they go for it and convert, obviously they go to 100%, they win the game.
Yep.
The field goal puts them at 55% prior to the snap, even after they gained like 0.3%, because that's such a high probability field goal. If they were to go for it and not get it, they would still be at, I think it was 49% chance to win.
Yeah,
so they're tied more often than not, because you've got Tennessee starting on their own 4. I was talking with Frank Frigo, who writes our Risky Business column, who covered the Patriots decision that we talked about. And you, at that point too, and you'll understand this as well, I'm sure, get into a behavioral aspect where if you're the Titans, you're on your own 4. You don't want to risk a mistake necessarily. You don't want to play it too conservatively because then you punt, they have good field position, but do you kind of play for a tie, play it more conservatively, and just play for the tie there? But looking at those numbers that I mentioned, the 49% if they fail, the required conversion rate on this was 12%.
Wow.
So the Jets would only have to be able to convert a 4th and goal from the 4 just over 1 out of 10 times, and that expected conversion rate is much greater than that, even down there by the goal line. So
yeah, and maybe this is more relevant on a 4th and 1, but something to consider that's unique to this situation: you can win the game on a safety, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, like, there's a lot of the game is not over if you go for it and fail here. Obviously it burns, it definitely burns, but you have great equity to go for it and make it. Even when you don't, you still have pretty good equity and ways to win the game. Get a stop, get the ball back with good field position, or even the direct win for a safety would be kind of cool. I don't know if I've ever seen one of those.
I'm not sure either.
But yeah, unfortunately, just not a good play call. I think went way too conservative. Tried to prolong the game. But yeah, you'll hear me say it in weeks past. I'll say it again. These offenses are too good. Don't give them the chance to beat you.
Yep. And I don't think anybody would have. Some people, there's always those people, but I don't think many people would have faulted him for going for it, even if they didn't get it there, because of the reasons we just explained there. So now that we've kind of covered the biggest storylines from the weekend, Scott, let's talk about our top 5 most impactful plays from the weekend's action. So these are the plays that had the most impact on the game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative, but it's going to be from the offense's perspective prior to the snap. This week, there's not a lot of positive for the offenses in our top 5s. We'll start with number 5, the only one we haven't covered. We'll kind of go through 4 through 1 fairly quickly. But number 5, the Giants and Saints. So New York had 3rd and 7 on their own 38 with 58 seconds left in the game. Down 21-18. Need a field goal to tie, touchdown to win. Daniel Jones has a pass to the 43 that Kenny Galladay takes all the way down to the New Orleans 34, getting them into field goal range at that point, setting them up for the game-tying field goal that would send it to overtime. They would go on to win this game in overtime, but this 3rd and long conversion increased their win probability by 23.5%. It took them from 25.2 up to 48.7. Again, with a tie in play here, pretty close, that the 48.7 close to 50 is taking into account the fact that 50% or a tie is worth 50% win probability. Number 4 is the Patriots at 3rd and 3 we mentioned, where Mac Jones' pass is incomplete, followed by the decision to kick the field goal afterwards. So that failed 3rd down combined with the pre-snap win probability of the next play, kicking the field goal, was a 28% decrease from 59.9 down to 31.9. Number 3 was the Jets and Titans, the 3rd and 1, where Zach Wilson ran to the right, went out of bounds. It was a 30.4% decrease from 85.4 down to 55, turning what was more likely a win on 3rd down, only getting 2 plays to get 1 yard, into a likely tie. They didn't go on to win, as we mentioned, but a 30.4% decrease. Number 2 is Nick Folk's field goal that went off the left upright there. Was just a little bit too far left. I think it was very close, but that one cost the Patriots 31.9%, and then the Randy Bullock field goal for the Titans, that was no good, cost them 35.8%. Scott, did you want to add anything? I said we covered these pretty heavily there in the top of the show.
Yeah, we hit on these quite a bit in the intro. That first one you mentioned, Daniel Jones connecting with Kenny Galladay. First off, good to see Kenny Galladay out of the NFC North, but also squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? There was some maybe a little bit of controversy in past weeks between that relationship. There's definitely some redemption on that play. Huge connection to move the ball downfield, getting set up, 1st and 10 in Saints territory, and obviously they go on to win that game. Big play there, high leverage play. The only other thing that I really wanted to point out is just how maybe it's some schadenfreude, but just seeing that Nick Folk kick hit the upright and then the weeping Patriots fans, I couldn't help but feel a little bit happy inside, only because, they have won so much through the years, and
especially on field goals and big moments.
When you're a fan of the various hapless sports franchises that I am, that becomes your normal, and to see some of that pain have to be kind of distributed elsewhere in the universe, I felt a sense of balance in that moment, and it was refreshing for this Chicago sports fan. So
awesome. Well, that will wrap up our most impactful plays of the week. If you're interested in seeing more about these plays, be sure to check out our top 5 section on EdjSports.com and follow us on social media at EdjSports to see more breakdowns. So let's change gears slightly a bit, Scott, here, and we'll talk about our top 5 best decisions from the weekend's games. So we actually, I don't think, have covered any of these so far. These are the decisions that coaches made that had the most positive impact on the game in terms of pre-snap win probability. So the difference at the point of decision before this play, you have to decide, am I going to go for it? Am I going to kick a field goal or punt, whatever the option is there? Sometimes it's both. You're choosing between 3, but whichever one you choose was the best choice, and it increased your win probability prior to the snap. So starting with number 5, we're going to go back to Thursday night, Jaguars and Bengals. So Urban Meyer did not make our top 5 worst decisions, although that decision to punt late in the game was a bad decision. There were a handful of much worse decisions, which we'll get to, but he does make our top 5 best decisions. Tied at 14 late in the 3rd quarter, 4th and 2 at the Cincy 38. We've said it a few times, and there's a couple more on this list that you're kind of in that no man's land where the field position we've talked about just isn't really worth it versus going for it and trying to retain possession. So it was a 4th and 2 at the Cincy 38. Chose to go for it, increasing the Jaguars' win probability by 3.7% up to 42% prior to the snap there. They completed. They were successful. Ended up taking a lead here in this game, but Joe Burrow, maybe the start of a great comeback career,
right.
Had an awesome second half, really, 4th quarter as well in this game.
Yeah, and another matchup of head coach versus former player, although kind of quite a bit different setup in this one. But yeah, I mean, this decision, good on Urban Meyer, checks all the boxes. You have a close game, actually a tied game here, 4th and 2, so really makeable conversion rate on these 4th and 2s, and you're just at a point in the field where there's not a lot of benefit to punting. The field goal is kind of a longer-ish field goal, so going for it here, slam dunk move, and comes through and makes the right call.
Yeah, and not only was this a matchup I mentioned last week between the last two number one overall picks, but it was also a rematch of the 2020 national championship, Clemson and LSU, where Joe Burrow obviously won that championship. Joe Burrow gets the best of Trevor Lawrence here again. Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer still searching for their first NFL win together, and each of their own first NFL win. So that has to wait another week. Moving on to number 4, we've got Mike McCarthy of the Cowboys, tied at 7 with the Panthers early in this game. Only 57 seconds left in the first quarter, facing 4th and 1 at their own 46-yard line. Chose to go for it, increase their win probability prior to the snap by 4.2%, jumping them up from 65 to 70 with a conversion of Dak Prescott for 21 yards on this one. Just a great decision. This is one that we see coaches a lot of times these days. I think more often than not now you see coaches do this. Even though they're kind of in minus territory, they're 4 yards shy midfield, they're still close enough. With that offense, Dallas almost, I feel like, should be going for it on every single 4th and 1. A lot of teams should, but just the strength of that offense, I think. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of this year.
Yeah, they're dynamic. This one, checks a lot of the boxes as well. Tie game, 4th and 1. You're on your own 46, so once again, you're sort of in that middle part of the field. And yeah, I'll just, say credit to Mike McCarthy. He kind of sneaks up on you, right? Mm-hmm. Like his rep maybe kind of below the radar, or maybe, doesn't come to mind as being one of the sharpest in the NFL, but I think he's sneaky good in these situations, notwithstanding that opening night game where, we kind of docked him a bit for not going for it on that final drive, and it eventually cost him. But yeah, right here, making the right call, going for it, keeping the offense in the field, and you'd like to highlight the overage yardage. There was some big overage yardage on the play that wound up resulting. So, good call by Mike McCarthy and those Dallas Cowboys. They're high-flying right now.
Yeah, and speaking of McCarthy, it's interesting that he gets, like you said, he gets a bad rap. And even last year was his first year in Dallas. He took the year off prior to that to kind of study up on – it sounds weird to study up on the NFL and kind of catch up. And he really dove deep into analytics. And last year, it's kind of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. He goes for it, he's aggressive, but doesn't get it, and does it in some of these unconventional situations that we agree with. But then he gets hammered for being too aggressive, and then he doesn't go, and he gets hammered for not being aggressive. He finished fairly well. I don't remember exactly where he was in our coach rankings last year, but I think in like 4th down decision making, he was top 5 in that statistic by our measures, and he just got a bad rap. Partly, that team just underperformed, and then the injury with Dak Prescott, that just kind of was the cherry on top after that kind of weird start to the season for them.
Yeah, it seems to me that any NFL coach that gets criticized for being too aggressive is likely just to be the result of whatever reporter or whomever playing results, right? So like there's no such thing as being too aggressive if you make it, right?
Right.
And so
like Doug Peterson when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, no one said he was too aggressive.
Or John Harbaugh with all the success he's had with the Ravens, Andy Reid with the Chiefs, like. The right decision is the right decision is the right decision, independent of what the immediate outcome is. And this one was done the right way by Mike McCarthy.
That's what I love. You mentioned Harbaugh there. Just a quick note on them a couple years ago when they dominated the regular season, fell to the Titans, but they were 0 for 2 on 4th and 1. They might have had one was a 4th and 2 in that game. Being aggressive, came into that game. I don't think they had been stopped on a 4th and 1 all year long. They get stopped on 2 of them. But, I don't think people maybe, were criticizing him there. We were, all for it. Just because you don't get that first one doesn't mean you don't go for it again.
Right.
They're more likely to convert both of those than they aren't. It just happened that, the 20% happened twice in that one. So, So moving on now to number 3, we've got a first-year head coach, Arthur Smith, who is on both of these lists this week. But with his best decision was a leading by 1. Late in the third quarter, again, kind of in that no man's land. 4th and 2 at the Washington 42. Chooses to go for it. It's good for a pre-snap win probability increase of 4.4%. And they didn't convert it initially, but this is one of those that people kind of forget can happen. A penalty, a roughing the passer. You can get a defensive holding. There are just a bunch of different ways you can convert. You don't even have to actually get the yardage. This one, they ended up getting I think this one was a somewhat questionable roughing the passer, if I remember correctly, but the Falcons were able to convert it. But prior to the snap, it was a 4.4% increase there.
Yeah, the conversions come in all shapes and sizes, and as you mentioned, penalties are absolutely one way to do it, and that comes through on this one, even though the immediate result of the play was a fail. But I remember seeing that play. It was really sort of strange. Matt Ryan kind of rolling out, chucking the ball down the field, and kind of got hit and froze up, went down to the turf.
And that was the one, I think, where it actually technically ended up being a sack because his knee went down. Maybe that might have been a different play, but they reviewed it because it was like an interception, but his knee was down, and then they had the roughing the passer, so it was kind of
bizarre. Weird. Yeah. Well, I mean, to just sort of quickly highlight the situation here, it really, once again, cliche, but checks all the boxes. You have a close game, 1-point game, 4th and 2 from the Washington 42. So, once again, you're in that middle part of the field. You have a really short way to go to convert. And it really, really matters quite a bit in this game because you're, in this case, just leading by 1. So you definitely want to maximize all of your possessions, and I think going for it here was the right call. So props to Arthur Smith on doing it.
And we're going to flip sides now. Number 2 is the other side of this game, Washington football team, Ron Rivera, who this was early in the game. They're down 3-0, 4th and 1 at the Atlanta 36, a similar situation. This one's early, though. 13-17 left in the second quarter. So a lot of times, you hear people say it's too early. There's a lot of time left. Punt the ball, kick the field goal, take the points, whatever you want to say in this situation. But there's a lot of time left, so why not go for it and try and extend that drive early on and get those points. This one was good for a 4.6% pre-snap increase. Again, that was 4th and 1 at the Atlanta 36. This one, we don't want to spend too much time yet, but 4th and 1, Atlanta 36. There's not much to gain from a punt. Maybe a field goal. We have field goal here was the next best play. You're indoors. That's still a 54-yarder, a fairly reasonable field goal for an NFL kicker. But he chose to go for it, made the correct decision. Good for a 4.6% pre-snap win probability increase.
Yeah, and I mean, check, and check. Once again, you have 4th and 1, so it's, from that standpoint, a slam dunk. The point on the field once again makes it a slam dunk, and you're trailing by 3 at that point. So you mentioned it's early in the game, and this is a matchup between two pretty even teams.
Not in a good way either.
Not in a good way either. There's just not a lot of possessions. Maximize your possessions. I think going for it here is the right call, even though it might raise the eyebrows of some, being that it is so early. Ron Rivera, I think Riverboat Ron has earned the reputation, and it's good to see him, come through again and make the right call, even when some might not think that it's the right call.
Yeah, I think coming in at number 1. Now, this decision isn't as great of a magnitude as we would see typically in a given week for our number 1 best decision. That's partly because, as we'll get to, our top worst decisions could have been good decisions, but they made the wrong decision.
Yeah.
So this week, Mike Zimmer, who we hammered a couple weeks ago against the Cardinals. Yeah, he bounces back. He's actually, I think last week had a couple good decisions. He might have been 4th or 5th in our top 5, or maybe just outside of it. But this one started off well. The Vikings, their opening drive, drove down, had 4th and 1 at the Cleveland 9. Get that far, he's not going to settle for a field goal there early in the game. The offense is moving the ball pretty well. Decides to go for it and increase their pre-snap win probability by 5.3%. They did convert this, ended up scoring a touchdown. Unfortunately for the Vikings, those were the only points they scored in that game. But he made the right decision and tops the list.
Yeah, it was tough sledding yesterday for really both those offenses. I think many would have expected a lot more points scored in that game. Good play call here, though, by Mike Zimmer. If you're listening, Mike, good to have you. Well done. Way to bounce back.
We don't hate you, we promise.
Good to see it. Obviously we can be quick to criticize those when we think the decisions were bad. We should be equally quick to praise when the decision is the right one. And this one was a good call. I think once again you're sort of in a spot where it's not obvious maybe that the classic cliche is just take the points, but despite being early in the game, midway through the first quarter, you're on a part of the field where you're really knocking on the door to score a touchdown. It sets up nicely if you get it 1st and goal. it's the right thing to do. And we think that there's about around a 5% gain here to be had, and the Vikings were able to collect it. So props to Mike Zimmer and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and this isn't really decision-based, but you mentioned being a low-scoring game there. I had mentioned on our betting preview last week, these were 2 top 10 offenses, but we still liked the under a little bit in this one, which ended up coming through. Both of those offensive lines were very good in Football Outsiders' adjusted sack rate. The defensive lines were not as great. Also, the defenses were very good or very bad in the first half, but got better in the second half. So one thing I kind of noted was hey, you might see a lot of scoring in the first half, not as much in the second. Turns out there wasn't a lot of scoring in the first half, but it was most of the scoring. So this one, the edge model, we actually ended up having this come in under, and that under hit on that one. So
yeah, and the market, from the market's perspective, the total was in the low 50s.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of points. That's definitely a lot of points. And so, even though you're early in this game, you have to expect that your opponent is a very capable offense that's going to be putting up points.
And Cleveland was number 2 coming into the week, I think, in offense.
Yeah, that's right. So really maximizing your possessions becomes key, and I think that this decision, it falls in alignment with that motto. Make the most of your possession here. Go for 7. Don't go for just a few. Don't settle for just a field goal.
So that'll wrap up our best decisions of the week for week 4. If you all are interested in seeing more of these plays, again, check out our top 5 section on EdjSports.com and on social media at EdjSports. So Scott, we got the good decisions out of the way. Now it's time to wrap up our weekend review with the fun part, our top 5 worst decisions of the weekend's action. Again, coaches' decisions that had the most negative impact on the game in terms of win probability prior to the snap. So starting with number 5, we had the 49ers and Seahawks. Kyle Shanahan was on this list last week. I think he was number 5 and maybe number 2, definitely number 5. He comes in a tie game against the Seahawks, division rivals, 2 good teams. Third quarter, 12-25, opening possession. Important to note, this is when Trey Lance was in for Garoppolo. It's a 4th and 3, just shy of midfield. Like I was talking with Aaron on the live stream I did with him just a little while ago. With this decision, they lose 4.2% in win probability. And looking at it with Trey Lance, he opens up the playbook so much. And this is kind of maybe getting into something different than strictly on the decision base. But 3 yard, he puts him in a lot of times for these short yardage situations on the goal line. And you just need a couple yards. And he's in the game at this point already and chooses to punt. So this one was a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder, they may have just the right sort of play dialed up for these types of situations, but I guess if they're punting, maybe not. I suppose not to psychoanalyze too much, but you could be trying to protect your rookie quarterback to some degree from facing scrutiny if things don't go your way. But kind of sweeping all of that aside, as we like to do around here at Edge Sports, you heard me say it once before. I'll say it again. This checks the boxes. You have a tie game. I know it's early third quarter. You're midfield, and it's 4th and 3. That's really, really just teed up to go for it. And Shanahan, I think, it's a head scratcher. I think especially once your star quarterback or once your starting quarterback goes out against a team like the Seahawks, who's very, very strong team. We know what Russell Wilson's capable of over there. You have to expect that when you give them the ball, points are likely to be put up on the board. So even though it's tied in this particular moment, you have to play for the future. You have to play for, under the expectation that they're going to be able to put up points. It's just the way it goes. NFL offenses are really good. You need to keep deny them the ball and put up some points of your own. Don't punt it here. Go for it.
Yep, and that's exactly what Seattle ended up doing, going up pretty big, scoring 28 points. San Francisco kind of came back a little bit, got a score or two towards the end of the game. But yeah, I agree with you. Close to midfield. You got to go for it, especially against a good team. So coming in at number 4 is the one we mentioned at the top of the show. One of those by Robert Saleh and the Jets, trailing by 2, 4th and 1 at your own 29. 9 minutes left in the third quarter. It's a 1 yard. That's kind of all we can, typically can say. I kind of try and think about a different way to say it, but it's 1 yard. Regardless where you are, you're at your own 29. It's not, they're not at their own 5. There's still some room where you can trust your defense there. Their defense really hasn't been that bad. I think they were about middle of the pack this year when I was previewing this game last week. So they and he's a defensive guy. You'd think maybe he's thinking punt away, trust the defense, but just would like to see coaches trust their defense more by going for it in some of these situations where the field position isn't the best. But this decision was a 5.2% decrease in pre-snap win probability, a 4th and 1 punt from the Jets' own 29.
Yeah, you're a pretty big dog in this game. Once again, you have to play for the way the game's likely to unfold. And you're already trailing a little bit here. I know it's a close game. There's the thought to keep it close or something like that. There's maybe a moral victory in losing by just a little.
That Titans defense is not good.
Yeah, and you'd much rather face the defense than the offense. Keep your offense on the field and go for it. I know you're on your own 29. Still the right thing to do. You just have to have the courage to do that there.
At number 3, we hit this one pretty hard at the top. The Patriots, Bill Belichick's choice to kick the field goal on 4th and 3 from the Tampa 37 late in the game, 59 seconds left. Cost them 10.1%. This is something that I failed to mention that I had mentioned earlier with Aaron. One thing you got to look at too, and we talked about the reverse, the chances of Brady going for a game-winning touchdown drive. This is very similar to what happened in Week 1. You mentioned it with McCarthy where Dallas kicked the field goal, left Tom Brady, I think it was like a minute 24 and no timeouts. Here he's going to have 54 seconds and 2 timeouts. That is pretty much a lifetime for Tom Brady in a game-winning drive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we definitely cut this one up quite a bit, and yeah, I totally agree. That point still rings true, right? Like you think if everything goes right, you're close to like a 90% plus favorite or something like that, and it's not even close to that. You're much closer to a coin flip than I think most people realize, and it's much better when you can go for it, pick up the first down, bleed the clock out, then kick your field goal, even if it's still close to a 50-yarder. It's much better outcome than settling for 56-yarder right there.
And coming in at number 2, I mentioned Arthur Smith is on both of these lists, and here he is, leading 30-28. This is a fun one because we're definitely gonna get some pushback. But 4th and 4, their own 31-yard line, 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, cost them 13% in pre-snap win probability. So the way I look at this, and I'm sure you can explain this even better, even if they go for it, they don't get it, they still have 3 timeouts left. Washington is down 2. So many times in this situation, you see teams play it conservatively, thinking they've got the field goal locked up.
That's exactly right.
You're still going to have a minute and a half, a minute 20, if you're able to stop them on those 3. Washington, granted, Atlanta's not a very good defense. Washington's offense hasn't been great. Taylor Heineke has had his moments and did it in this game, but it's easily defensible in this situation.
Yeah, this one is definitely more of a fun one. Absolutely agree there. So you highlight a very good point, which our model is able to capture, right? So when you give the ball back over in these situations, so many times it's going to go run, timeout, and then maybe a pass or maybe a run and third down, depending on the distance. And so you have, in either case, a really good chance of getting that ball back. Those runs at the end of the game are very low efficiency. They're typically plus or minus a yard or something like that, just to use up the timeouts. So really, you kind of have like 2 interesting paths here, right? Like you punt it away, you burn your timeouts. Like the really crucial thing is you have to stop a first down, but that is still, that is still at play if you go for it and miss it, right? You're kind of in a similar situation, although now you're sort of like conceding a field goal, right? Mm-hmm. So by going for it, you can continue to basically use up all of the clock and then only need a field goal versus having to score a touchdown. If you go for it, miss it, and they're sort of in field goal range. So it's you're still the cool thing here is that the score difference is 2, and that even if you like go in most situations when you go for it and fail, you're still getting the ball back with a very good chance to win the game, right? You can go down the field and a touchdown wins it. So that definitely makes this one pretty interesting, and I think can make it sort of hard for a human to wrap their mind around all of those potential scenarios. But yeah, I think we trust the model to really value this situation appropriately, and it's the right thing to do to go for it here. Once again, the clock is paramount, and so with 2 minutes left, you can drive down the field, really use up a lot of it, and then the ideal scenario, the first order scenario, is you just kick the field goal and win. But even when you don't, you're left in a spot with 3 timeouts where you can stop them. Even you're not happy to concede the field goal, but you're able to concede a field goal here and still get the ball back to win the game. So there's definitely a lot of interesting ways you can win the game here. And the model's able to pick up on these and still thinks it's the right thing to do to go for it. It turns out to be our biggest error of the week.
Yeah, so this one was second biggest error behind that Jets decision, just barely.
Oh, right, sorry.
But yeah, no worries. But when you look at this game too, the drive before that Atlanta had the ball, they ran it 4 times. The second time they got 13 yards. The first one was no gain, 13 yards. They ran it for a yard, ran it for 2 yards, and then an incomplete pass. Almost, they still had 12, almost 13 minutes left when they got the ball. They had a lead. It seemed like, they were up 8. Seemed like they were just trying to run some time down. Punted. Washington goes on a 6-minute drive, doesn't get the 2-point conversion to tie it up, but then you look in the situation, they have the 4th and 4, make this error to punt the ball. Washington goes down in a minute and looks like 10 seconds and is able to score and wins the game. So this is kind of that perfect situation where a lot of times we see teams will punt here, they end up winning, and people are like, no, they would have lost. This is your situation. You get the ball back with only 33 seconds left and only 1 timeout, which still isn't terrible with Matt Ryan. He hasn't been what he was in the past, but 33 seconds in a timeout isn't bad, whereas you potentially could have been down 1 instead of down 4. And like you said, 3 timeouts left or no timeouts left, but a minute and 20 seconds left to get just a field goal. So, yeah, number 2, just shy of number 1, which was Robert Saleh's decision to kick the field goal on 4th and goal after the Zach Wilson lost the 3 yards at 13.1. So just a 0.1% difference there in the top 2. So Arthur Smith is just beat out for the top of that list. So I'm sure he's not too upset about that. So yeah, really love having the insight on these decisions each week that you give us, Scott. That'll wrap up the worst decisions. If you all are interested in seeing more with these plays that you're listening out there, again, be sure to check out the top 5 section on our website, EdjSports.com, and check out Risky Business by Frank Friga, who highlighted Joe Judge and his anti-analytics approach, especially after those comments he made last week, and how it's costing the Giants this week. He also added in a little bit about going into a little bit more detail, as we explained on that Bill Belichick decision, looking at the decision to kick the field goal or go for it there late in the game. So as always, we'll wrap up today's show by previewing the Monday Night Football matchup between the undefeated Las Vegas Raiders and Los Angeles Chargers. This one looks to be close and competitive. The Raiders are hoping to hold on to their undefeated record. We're not as high, and Football Outsiders is not as high on either of these teams as their records show. As Aaron mentioned earlier this morning on our live stream, the Chiefs are not as good as what they really probably are. The defense is really holding them back. They're only, I think, middle of the pack overall. So that win by the Chargers, while it was a great win, when really looking at the play and the numbers, wasn't as good of a win as you might think. So how is Edge looking on the rankings, or not on the rankings, sorry, on the preview of this Monday Night Football game, which I think it was last year, had a very exciting game that went into overtime there around Christmas with Justin Herbert sneaking it in. I think he pulled kind of a Drew Brees and jumped threw the ball over the pile to get in. But what's this next installment of this matchup looking like?
Yeah, we so just to briefly introduce what the market thinks real quick. The Chargers are currently sitting at 3-point favorites, and the over-under for the game is 51.5. Based on those comparisons, we actually like Vegas in this game. We think that a fairer spread would be the Chargers -1 or the Raiders +1. So we like their side if you're able to get those, to capture that +3 for Vegas. On the over-under, we're quite a bit apart from the market. So we actually think this game is likely to feature a whole bunch of scoring. We think a fairer number for the over-under is actually 57 compared to that 51.5 number that you'll find in the market. So the main play that we like in this game is going over on that total. And if we had to pick a side, I think we give a slight nod to the Raiders in this game. Shifting over here a second, looking at where the public money sits, it is a pretty close 50-50 split between the two teams. Nothing too interesting there. As far as like the number of bets placed, it is a 64-36 breakout in favor of the Chargers. So most of the bets are being placed on the Chargers, whereas the money's more even. Not really a ton that I glean from that. I think, just to sort of recap, usually the number of bets is a representation of where the retail crowd is has their eyes on. Like what side are they backing?
Your Joe Schmoes, right?
Yeah,
for lack of a better word.
Yeah, your casual bettors. Whereas the money is money talks, right? And so where are the sharps betting? You usually want to look at where most of the money is. In this case, it seems pretty even. I think that seems about right here. Once again, we disagree slightly with the market on the point spread, but it's not by very much. We have a much stronger opinion about the total.
And speaking of the sharps, on our website as well, we have a partnership with Sharp Rank that kind of weeds out some of the people that maybe claim to be sharps. They have their 5-star consensus, which is their kind of top level sharps. They're also on the Chargers at 62%, so a little bit higher than we are, but both of us are still on the Chargers overall. It seems like, though, every week, or that seems like it has been every week, we've been a little bit higher on the Raiders more than the market every week. Week 1, we liked them over Baltimore straight up, so definitely against the spread there. Week 2 against Pittsburgh, we liked the Raiders by about 2 or 3 points more last week against Miami as well. We liked them. So again this week, like Scott mentioned, about a 2-point difference. Still like the Chargers to win overall, but there is a little bit of edge in that Chargers -3 or that Vegas +3. Sorry, taking the Raiders on that side. Although it has come down from 3.5, which Aaron mentioned was big if you were able to get +3.5 earlier this week.
Yeah, that is always a big move, that difference between 3 and 3.5. Obviously, can't go back in time now, but yeah, certainly want to pay attention to that. It looks like, as sort of game time approaches, that things are slightly moving in our direction to like the Raiders more than what was thought of them earlier in the week.
Also, can't wait for that Monday Night Football game. Should be exciting. Those teams, both pretty good offenses, defenses.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Chargers defense have been good, but expecting a lot of points in that one tonight, which is kind of all you can really ask for on a Monday Night Football to end the week. Been at work all day. You want to see some excitement.
Yeah.
Don't want it to put you to sleep right away.
Yeah, and those teams have definitely found themselves into some interesting games in recent memory. That Week 1 game that Vegas was in was pretty nuts. Yep. And hopefully it's able to deliver again on Monday night. That would be cool.
Well, that will wrap up our Week 4 show, so be sure to check out all of our analysis from Week 4 on EdjSports.com. Again, download our EdjSports app, available for both iOS and Android, to get your betting preview for Monday Night Football and every matchup for the rest of the season. If you watched our betting preview videos, you would have noticed a few of our picks hitting once again this week. The biggest one was the Jets. They were one of my moneyline value picks. We had them at 44% pregame win probability. The market was down around 27%, so there was a 17% difference. That one ended up coming through for us. So stay tuned later this week for our pregame matchup videos and our Week 5 betting preview on Thursday. So Scott, thanks for joining me. I will actually be out next week. Scott will be with you. We'll have someone else in here with Scott, but I will be returning after Week 5 or after Week 6's games. So thanks for joining us and enjoy the weekend action.